Welcome to another episode of Uncommon Entrepreneurs Lunch and Learns. I'm Drew. I'm here with Pedro Rivera today.
Hey, thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good buddy down here in Puerto Rico. So for those that are tuning in, we're based down here in Puerto Rico. There's some interesting tax incentives and just a good business scene that's going on. So we've been highlighting a lot of successful entrepreneurs down here in the community that are making moves, making things happen, thinking creatively outside the box as we go through this kind of global shakeup and reset. And we all need fresh ideas. We all need to be, held inspired and get to know people that, might be living with near you in the community and, what they've been up to that you maybe didn't even realize. On top of people are, signing in from across the world, etc. Just this information is very relative, especially on today's topic, because we're going to be talking a lot about blockchain, crypto, and where that world's heading. So appreciate you joining, Pedro.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
So just a little bit about Pedro Rivera's background. He's a blockchain consultant and investor, world traveler, community builder, and public speaker. He's a networking professional. He has leveraged his relationships globally to help a variety of companies achieve their respectable goals. He's an organizer of the local Crypto Mondays in San Juan, a local meetup that has had weekly panels for the past 2 years with some of the most prominent figures in Fintech as guests and panelists. Personally attended. It's definitely a heartbeat of the community. He's part of the Puerto Rican Diaspora who believes in an economic revival for Puerto Rico that will include manufacturing, technology, and agriculture.
Yeah, and a couple other things, but no, I appreciate that, and that's Good intro there, and I appreciate you guys for having me, man. You yourself are an interesting individual. I wonder when's going to come the Uncommon Entrepreneurs where we hear the Drew Cutcom
Yeah, we'll do that soon. It's a good point. Kind of building for that. But let's talk a little bit more about your background, like how you got to back to Puerto Rico and that.
Yeah, so, well, I am Puerto Rican, right, as you guys know, and I have actually fairly, very, strong ties to the island in the sense that my grandmother's sister is actually Felisa Rincon, Doña Fela, for those who are Puerto Rican. She was the first female mayor of San Juan and actually the first female mayor of any city of the United States in being San Juan, Puerto Rico. Back in 1946, I believe, is when she became mayor, and she was mayor of San Juan for about 16 years. So that was my grandmother's older sister, so we have a strong history of politics and working for the people on the island. And, I was born and raised in New York, and I never really thought of Puerto Rico as my home until I came here after the hurricane, in 2018, Hurricane Maria. And then, of course, in 2017. And then in 2018, when Brock Pierce started a big movement for all the cryptopreneurs to come down here and basically just take advantage of the tax incentives, as well as utilizing our resources and our abilities to basically be problem solvers to bring some help to the Puerto Rican people. So that's basically the diaspora version of my story.
Cool. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So what was kind of the appeal to come back? What it maybe fill us in also on kind of like the crypto blockchain scene down here. That was the pull of why I came down here originally, was for that purpose. So maybe kind of fill people in that aren't as familiar and kind of give the heartbeat of what's happening here.
Yeah, so I was actually in the insurance business and I actually owned a bakery in Miami prior to moving to Puerto Rico. I got into a car accident, and pretty much like 4 or 5 days later, it was not like a terrible car accident where I was stuck in the hospital, but I was pretty banged up at home. I actually fell asleep at the wheel doing about 80, and I rear-ended another car that was getting off the highway. Somehow or another, I ended up in the left lane to the right lane and rear-ended them. I was doing about 80, they were doing about 30, and by a miracle of God, everybody lived, everybody was okay. But I was pretty banged up. And in the process, I had a friend of mine come to me and started talking to me about blockchain and crypto and gave me about $200 worth of Bitcoin. FYI, anyone who wants to learn about Bitcoin, or if you are in crypto and you want to teach other people about crypto, that is the fastest way. You give people some Bitcoin, and after that, they're going to become naturally interested, even if it's for no other reason, for how to get the money off of their digital wallet and into their bank account so they can have the ability to spend it. In that process, they will learn themselves. But with that being said, he gave me the Bitcoin, and I'm a naturally inquisitive person. So I started doing research. I couldn't move. I was laying in bed. And for about 3 days, maybe 4 days, I started watching videos and researching on Google and trying to really understand what Bitcoin was. And it quickly brought me to blockchain and understanding blockchain as the focal point of it, as the basis of technology. And I started, ironically, one of the first videos that I watched that made sense to me was What is Blockchain by a little young guy by the name of Brock Pierce. And the irony of all this is obviously, look who, he's one of my best friends now here on the island. So fast forward, I ended up started attending meetups in Miami. It was the Miami Blockchain Society at the time. And then from that, we actually founded Crypto Mondays Miami in Miami. And then I went on tour for an ICO to raise capital. And in the process, I learned, everything there is about the industry. And, I've been to probably 30 different countries in the past 2 years. And it all started from that, and just really recognizing the benefits of blockchain and recognizing the fundamental principles of it and being able to explain it to the common person, which is still something that a lot of people struggle with understanding.
So this is good. So let's kind of jump into that, some of the fundamentals, and then I know we'll get into some more technical and where we see the future going. But it's maybe not everybody that's watching, people have a strong interest. They understand that it's pretty logical, the future of digital currency, but fill people in.
Well, just make it real easy, right? So blockchain, right? A real easy definition for it is just to understand it's a database. Just think of it like an Excel sheet. So if you have an Excel sheet that the network or the community has access to, and everyone on the network can see all the information that's input onto this Excel sheet, and every time you attempt to put more information, fill a cell or a block in the blockchain, the network, or over 51% of the network, has to agree that the information in that cell is valid. If the network does not approve that transaction, then that cell doesn't get inputted, another block is not formed, to give you a different analogy. But if the network agrees that that transaction is valid, and then I gave you $10 and you accepted it, and I actually have $10 worth of digital currency to give you, then ultimately they approve the transaction, and that's where you have the transactions formed.
Got it.
That network is the network of miners, just so people understand how the transactions work.
Proof of work.
Exactly, and that's exactly how blockchain works. It's just that simple. Just people complicate it. Now, there's some more technical aspects of it, but just for the 30,000 feet overview, that's exactly how it works. It's a very simple database that the community has access to, and if they approve, or the majority of the network approves the transaction, then you add to the database, and every time you add to the database, it is time-stamped and dated with all the information from all the previous cells in there, along with the new cell, so nothing can be corrupted and nothing can be changed. Once you recognize the power of that and what that means, I mean, you yourself, you're big into real estate, right? You have a real estate background, and you've also done a ton of real estate investing. If you could think of how many times you've paid auditors, or you've paid inspectors, or different types of people to verify that the information you're reading and the documents that you have is actually accurate, if you no longer had to do that, the prices of all of your transactions would have gone down significantly. That's what blockchain can do for the real estate industry, is essentially being that third-party verification tool that you need, as opposed to paying an inspector or an appraiser or this person or that person. It's like whenever I tell you I did renovations to a particular property, you can see what materials I used, what contractor I used, how long it took, how much I spent on it, X, Y, Z. It's all very verifiable.
So
transparent information that we do not need another party to do so. So that's what it does, is it lowers the cost of goods and services across the board when it's applied properly. Now, granted, it's a new technology, and there's still a lot of hiccups along the way. That still, it takes time to grow and develop. It's only 10 years old, or 11, almost 11 years old. This October, I believe the Bitcoin white paper would be 11 years old. So with that, is going to be some, some challenges along the way as we grow. But you could see more and more applications of it and becoming more mainstream. Just this week, we received news that 7-Eleven and CVS will now start selling Bitcoin at their cash registers.
Wow.
That's going to be key for mass adoption and more for the mainstream growth of, digital currencies. But yeah, that's,
So what's Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is the name of that particular cell, if we want to go back to the example of Excel. So it's a unit of measure on a blockchain named Bitcoin. Just like these cells that move back and forth, they can have a particular name for it. In Bitcoin, that's all it is a name of that cell. So you have in those in each one of those unit of measures, in Bitcoin's case in particular, you have a total of 21 million Bitcoin total that will ever be mined completed. So that makes it limited in nature, and it makes it obviously going to, supposedly it will continue to increase gradually over the course of time. Now, it's an immature market, and as you know, dealing with markets in various industries, whenever you have a market that does not have such high of a market cap, it's easy to manipulate for the bigger players out there, and that's why you have so much volatility in it. As the market cap of Bitcoin grows, the volatility will shrink. Very simple economics.
Got it. And what are altcoins? And I'm sure people hear that term, just to lay one more foundation.
Yeah, altcoins are anything that is not Bitcoin, right? So if it's not a Bitcoin, it's an altcoin. Some people include Ethereum in that. I think Ethereum is still somewhat of an altcoin, but if you don't want to consider Ethereum an altcoin, Ethereum is a smart contract platform that makes it different from Bitcoin in the sense that it's a blockchain that's designed for smart contracts. Smart contracts are going to rule our world. This is an absolute fact. Smart contracts are contracts that are executed upon completion of set of task items. So if you and I have a contract which stipulates that if I give you $10, then all of a sudden you will do X, Y, Z, then that's what happens. When I give you the $10, naturally your organization will do X, Y, Z, and then my organization will then do the next task that's associated with it, all the way to the completion of the actual contract itself. So this is a way to do business without having intermediaries involved, just by setting forth the parameters of your contracts and the precepts of them.
Got it. So reducing friction, going peer-to-peer, and building trust with who you're doing business with, even if you don't know them.
Well, the trust isn't in the people. The trust is in the transaction itself. So the transaction and the process of the transaction is clearly laid out in the smart contract. So I don't have to trust you. I just have to believe in what we're doing. And that's the benefit of using smart contracts, is that it eliminates your control over over what is taking place. At if any point you violate a step in the smart contract, then my next step will not happen automatically. So it's all set and forth automatically, so that removes the element of trust from you and the next party. And that's why you need third parties when you do business, is because you don't trust the other person you're doing business with.
You're right. So how do you see the adoption of blockchain, Bitcoin, et cetera, kind of playing out in the near future? We're in the middle of a pandemic. People are wondering what's going on. How do you see it all play out?
Well, I think the pandemic is speeding up the adoption curve dramatically. I think that ultimately we still, and I say we as the blockchain industry, are still some steps away from being technologically ready to accept all these new users that are going to be onboarded. Ultimately, blockchain is still very clunky, still very slow. There's a lot of challenges that are associated with that. There's too much technical ability that's needed for the general public to really use blockchain as it currently stands. But that will change, right? Programs will come out and make things easier. The internet was not an easy thing to use when it came out.
Sure.
Email wasn't an easy thing to use when it came out.
Good point.
I remember using the internet back in the day where you had to type out every single aspect of the address of what you were going to. Now you write facebook.com and it goes right to Facebook, right? So that's advancements in browsers, and that's what blockchain is missing. Blockchain is missing browsers and email functions per se, right? If you're comparing it to the internet growth, that are going to make it easy to use. We're still missing exchanges and wallets and different types of technology that make it easy for my grandmother to use and everyone else.
I think a key advantage of this technology is decentralized versus centralized. Explain maybe what the difference is on that and how that plays into a factor.
Yeah, well, keep in mind, you do have centralized blockchains. Let's be clear about that, right? So centralized blockchains are going to play an important role in our future moving forward as well. There will be plenty of centralized blockchains, and there will be needs for them as well, because whenever you have something centralized, it can move faster. You can keep the information in-house a lot more. So whenever you have sensitive information for your company, you probably don't want a public blockchain having it. But nonetheless, let's just deal with the public side of the blockchain. The decentralized aspect of it, it gives you and everyone else comfort in knowing that no organization or no one entity is in control of that currency. Like right now, in not only the U.S., I don't want to pick on the U.S., right? I just say every single country out there is printing up money and devaluing their currency right now. No one or most people do not have a say-so over that. I know Trump didn't call me and ask me, do you want me to print up $6 trillion for the stimulus package? He probably didn't call you either. That's going to devalue the American dollar. There's no way around that. Every economist out there knows this, right? And even general public generally knows that as well. It kind of makes sense to them, but we really don't understand that because it hasn't affected us just yet. But a year from now or 2 years from now, when you go to buy something that's not an American-made product and you recognize that your dollar, the dollar amount that you paid for that 2 years ago has gone up 40%, then you start realizing that your currency is being devalued. Now, in this particular situation, being that all of the world currencies are being devalued at the same time, at pretty much the same pace, I'm not sure how that will affect it moving forward. Generally, the entire globe's currencies don't go down at the same time. Generally, it's one or the other, right?
Sure.
A couple years ago, Venezuela's currency failed, right?
Yep.
Greece's currency, Greece's economy failed, right? So you have various examples of this over, different countries globally where their economies have failed. Right now, all of them are failing. So it's an interesting experiment moving forward, and it's something that's never happened before. But ultimately, as far as, that's going to push more people into digital currencies, right? Because of the limited nature aspect of it and the fact that your country's government does not control your money supply. I used to own a bakery in Miami, and 2 of my employees were from Venezuela. One of them owned 5 bakeries in Venezuela and 2 houses. The other one owned 2 bakeries and 1 house. Both of them were working for me for $13 or $14 an hour in Miami. They had nothing. And that happened after Venezuela's economy collapsed. They went to the bank one day. Both of them had plenty of money in the bank, and no longer could they access their money anymore. This was like one day to the next. This wasn't something that you could predict happening. I mean, you probably could, like right now, there's a lot of people who say the U.S. economy is failing, and one day that could potentially happen. But nobody thinks you go to the bank tomorrow and all of a sudden you can't pull out any money from the bank anymore, right? That's pretty much what happened in Venezuela. That can happen here. The difference is the United States has the military to pretty much take over another country and still be up on resources. Venezuela doesn't. So, as far as adoption goes, I would imagine the events that are taking place during the pandemic are going to exacerbate that. And just naturally, the industry itself is making moves to more public consumption through Fortune 100 companies. As you start to see bigger organizations and institutions adopting cryptocurrency, whether it's accepting them as payment or utilizing blockchain internally for their databases, you start to see that more and more often. I know a lot of auto manufacturers are starting to change their supply lines over to, there's a couple of them that I know for certain that I'm unable to speak about, but there's a couple of large U.S. auto manufacturers that have already making the turn to making their all supply chains will be on a blockchain really soon. That's going to happen, no doubt about it. In fact, that's one of the clearest cut use cases for blockchain would be supply chain. The next obvious, probably the first one is going to be the database for financial institutions. I'm surprised that hasn't taken place already.
Got it. Yeah, we're kind of actually going down that same line of thinking. So what other use cases, like how do you maybe help paint a picture with how this is going to, affect the average person, or, just how do you see that playing out? Elaborate.
Well, I mean, once the technology matures to the point where you do not have, where it's not needed to be so technical to use it, the average person probably won't recognize the benefits of it. Where you will recognize the benefits of it is in your case specifically, is when you start to not need appraisers anymore or inspectors, when you start to rely on the databases that are on blockchain for information, and you no longer need an inspector or an appraiser to verify that information, whether or not it's true or not, and now all of a sudden your price to purchase properties has gone down, or the closing cost, or the appraisal cost, or whatever services you require to do so. The same is true with a lot of other industries as you eliminate a lot of, I'll give you another example, underwriting. Underwriting is a process that has steps, right? So when you're an underwriter, you undergo a variety of steps to calculate risk associated with a potential finance in a deal. That all can be automated through smart contracts. When that happens, a lot of underwriters are going to lose their jobs. Very simple. In fact, they'll be more accurate than underwriters because they won't skip any steps and they won't show any favoritism. It'll be 100% what the data states. So the use cases for blockchain, they're vast, man. I would imagine they're going to start to be implemented more and more. The government's budget is by far the clearest and easiest and actually can be done today, literally, use case for blockchain. I remember 2 years ago when we got here, and the majority of the crypto community, we had a bunch of meetings with the Puerto Rican government. At the time, Ricardo Rosselló was the governor. We sat with him and we talked all about how we could utilize blockchain to clean up corruption and basically make Puerto Rico net positive, because we highlighted a lot of areas where useful and wasteful spending existed within the Puerto Rican budget, and it could be eliminated through the through the use of blockchain technology just for simple database, not for anything else, right? We don't need anything else but just all the transactions that are coming from the federal money into Puerto Rico. We want to put that on a blockchain, and all money that's gone out, we want to make sure it's basically accounted for on the blockchain. This way, we all have the ability to look at where this money's going and coming. They yeah us right out the door. They were not interested in doing that. Governments are not interested in transparency. It's going to be you people at home. I'm not sure which camera this is, but it's going to be you people at home it's going to take to be educated and understanding of the benefits of this type of technology and to request it for your governments to basically implement it. Your government has no desire to be transparent with you how they're spending your money. Zero. And the only way that's going to happen is when people become more educated about blockchain and what it is, and
go to the voter booth
and push it out there and demand it from the governments. Because the government has no interest in showing you where they're spending your money, bottom line.
Exactly, and that's where a lot of waste comes and all of the benefits. Mm-hmm. So another use case that we were talking about as we were catching up prior to this is the gaming industry. How do you see that being affected and so forth? I
can imagine that there will be a ton of users that will be brought into crypto from gaming. In fact, gamers have the most experience dealing with digital currencies before digital currencies actually took hold. There's a lot of talk about digital currencies being started on, things like Second Life and stuff like that. Even before then, there was different types of video games that were out there that you would have, currency inside of the game that you could use to purchase different items, and you buy the currency with actual physical, money with,
Yeah.
So those games are, these gamers are they're accustomed to using digital wallets and understanding how they work. So it's a natural transition for them. I'd imagine a game like Fortnite, Call of Duty, one of those types of games that are global and that have a huge fan base and user base. One of those games were to institute a digital currency, it would definitely bring forward a lot of users, and ultimately gamers are generally young, 12 to 35 years old, somewhere in that age group. Those people will grow up to become business people who will now have an understanding of how digital currencies work and digital wallets and blockchain, and comfortable with it, so there will naturally be users moving forward.
That's logical. You're right, because usually new technology is picked up by the younger generation first, and that happens all the time in games. That it's just a easier way to kind of transfer, and have value in it, and so forth. Yeah. So what's kind of preventing that from happening now? Like what in the regulation scheme of things? I know that's kind of a big factor. If you want to speak on that.
Yeah, so part of the work that I've done in this industry has been dealing with regulators and regulatory bodies, both domestically and foreign. So I'm constantly in communication with different regulators about various aspects of the industry. And one of the biggest issues for gaming platforms to do that would be regulatory concerns on how do you actually sell these digital currencies on your platform. There's a lot of challenges with that. They would essentially have to get money transmitter licenses in most of the markets that they operate in, and maybe even potentially exchange licenses depending on what markets they operate in. And there's a lot of regulatory hurdles that come from that this is probably the reason why it hasn't happened yet. I imagine what will happen though is that one of the major exchanges will probably partner with a game that's huge, let's just say like Fortnite, and we'll throw a random company out there like Binance. If Binance were to partner with Fortnite to provide them with Bitcoin, it probably would work. It probably would work, and in which case, then all of a sudden, I think there's something like 200 million people that play Fortnite globally. It's an outrageous number. It's
Wow.
a pretty big game. So if you have 200 million people all of a sudden, now buying and selling Bitcoin, all of a sudden the price of Bitcoin is going to go real high. The demand for it will go real high. And that's just, that's a natural order of things. So not only will you have like different industries that will bring forth whole user bases, but also as people become more educated, the technology matures, and the governments, man. Governments are up next. In the last stimulus bill, there was language, when the United States issued the initial stimulus bill that was written by, I believe, Pelosi, is the House Representatives who wrote it. She had initially language that pertained to the $1,200 that each citizen would receive would come in the form of a digital currency, a digital U.S. dollar, and we were going to be issued U.S. digital wallets. That language didn't make it into the next, the draft of the bill. For whatever reason, they scrapped it, and as you know, they basically just issued the checks in the mail or directly into your bank account. But my thoughts are that's going to happen soon. The U.S. is not going to ease up on their regulations until they figure out a way to maintain their position as the world-leading currency. Right? The U.S. dollar runs the world currently. So the U.S. is not in a rush to make regulations that would adopt competitors to their currency until they have a valid replacement on the digital side for their own currency. So we'll see how that pans out moving forward.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. It's a pretty important theme. You've traveled 30 countries in the last couple of years. You have a pulse. You've been to.
With Corona, I've been stuck here though, obviously.
Got it. So prior to that.
Yeah.
So how have you seen, the lack of regulation, the clarity that's not there affected startups, and how is that maybe going overseas? And
I've talked about this for 2 years, and just about every place I've been and spoke at. It's very simple. If the United States continues to overregulate, entrepreneurs will continue to move overseas. There's nothing stopping us from going overseas. I'll give you an example. Right now, if you wanted to do a token sale in the United States, which I'm honestly a very big supporter of. I know that there was a lot of mishaps in the ICO explosion in 2017, and a lot of unworthy projects received funds. But I think overall the concept of an ICO is an extremely incredible concept. I think it definitely has a future, and I think it will come back. I think the fact that you can take an idea and you can crowdfund on the internet and people can purchase tokens that can be liquid within a matter of 6 months, you as an investor know that there's not really an investment where you can have your money back in 6 months. It just generally doesn't work like that. So the fact that as an investor you can put money out and has the potential to return that quickly with that high of an ROI is appealing to investors. And of course to entrepreneurs, having the ability to crowdfund without giving up any equity is also an extremely appealing concept. So I think that ultimately ICO will come back. I really do. I think it does have a future.
What is an ICO?
Initial coin offering, which they've already transitioned to initial exchange offerings, and they basically changed and changed again. But that's mainly because regulations, right? U.S. is in particular cracked down on utility tokens versus security tokens, right? So they identified digital currencies as securities, and as you know, with securities, you have to adhere to a ton more regulations with dealing with the SEC to be able to sell them. It makes it very hard for the little guy to crowdfund a project, right? So if you have this kid that's in, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and he comes up with the phenomenal idea or concept to basically utilize trash recycling system. It doesn't even have to be blockchain based, but the fundraising mechanism is through ICO, right? This kid comes up with a great idea on how to recycle trash and turn the trash into fuel. Let's just throw a random idea out there. Kid does not have a strong background, but he's really bright, right? 17-year-old kid, everyone knows, maybe 20, let's put him 23. It's a great idea, great concept. He's got a prototype in the field. If that kid wanted to raise money through a token sale, he couldn't do so in the United States. He couldn't afford it, bottom line. But he could go overseas and register for a token sale and do so overseas, and he can raise the money in a couple of days, depending on how great his marketing is and how much reach he has and how loud his voice is on the internet. But the potential's there. I mean, there's been projects that raised $600 million in 15 minutes. Obviously that happened in 2017. Things have changed since then, but it is possible, right? If you have the right idea, think about what a COVID vaccine would do in a token sale right now, right? So if you had a COVID vaccine and you wanted to raise capital for it and you didn't want to give up any equity on the project, but you wanted to do so with tokens, I know a lot of people that would invest in that right now.
Valid analogy. That's very timely analogy.
Right. So, and I think that the fundraising, concept of ICOs will return. I just think the regulations need to catch up. So the U.S. has overregulated that issue. The SEC has essentially declared that, whenever you issue these digital currencies, they're in essence a security. And they got to pass the Howey test, which I'm not going to bore you guys with the Howey test on. It's an ancient law that was written in 1933, securities law, that what identifies something as a security, and it just does not apply to today's market, right? You can't take a law that was written in 1933 and apply it to 2020 technology. And that's the problem the U.S. is having with regulation. They're trying to use antiquated laws to regulate new technologies, and they just don't fit. Right, and that's why you're having so much conflict with it. The SEC deems digital currencies as securities, yet the IRS has deemed them as property. You get taxed as property. So within your own governing body, you have different agencies that have different definitions for these digital currencies. And that's where you need to start. You need to have a blanket definition that exists, that is true throughout all departments, and you have regulations that set forward this. And this is not anything that I haven't told the regulators either, by the way. I've had conversations with regulators here in Puerto Rico as well as in D.C. and Wyoming. Wyoming is probably the most progressive place in the U.S. for crypto regulations. They have a senator there that is extremely pro-crypto, and he's very much lobbied. And being it's not a big place, it's kind of easy to kind of put forth agendas there if you have someone that's kind of very popular and has a big presence there. But yeah, man, regulations in the U.S. are tough, man, and make it very difficult for you to do these kind of things because of the securities laws.
Yeah, I think we're definitely on the same page, and history shows whenever you don't adopt or welcome a new technology with open arms, that's when a civilization can fall behind and become irrelevant, especially when this is the internet of money we're talking about here, to be able to transfer and crowdsource and has so many advantages for the people.
I mean, what you just said is powerful and is layered, right? Every global leading civilization that existed throughout the history of time has failed and has collapsed. Every single one. The United States, being the current global leader, right, is showing all the signs that it's deteriorating and is headed for a collapse.
Yeah.
And anyone who studies history can see that. We've copied and emulated every other single global leading civilization that's ever existed by doing everything that they did wrong to collapse. By spreading yourself too thin and essentially over-regulating and being resistant to new technologies and so on and so forth. Just time and example after example of the U.S. going the wrong direction. Can we turn it around? It's possible, right? Because we're in a position that other global leading civilizations have not been, in the sense that we have a military that's stronger than everyone else's. And we're by far and ahead. We're leaps and bounds exponentially ahead of everyone else. And unfortunately, this world is run by violence. So from that perspective, we can potentially hold on to leadership position for some time, but technology has the ability to leapfrog other, growth in leaps and bounds, man. So other places could leapfrog us with better technology. And that's what's happening right now.
Interesting. So, a question: do you see digital dollar being a reality and in what time frame, and how does that play out?
I think the digital dollar is already here. I'm just not sure how they're going to roll it out and how they're going to make it active for everyone. It makes all the sense in the world from a government perspective, and this to be centralized, by the way, not a decentralized version. But a digital dollar would essentially, in my mind, prevent tax evasion. You know, you could calculate a person's taxes at the time they spend their money in whatever faucet they're spending it through smart contracts. So a digital dollar has a lot of pros for the government. It's just essentially the U.S. government would be admitting that the dollar is no longer the world leader. But I think that the globe is already caught up to that. I mean, you have other places that have stopped using the U.S. dollar as their, you know, China, Russia, right? And in fact, there's talks of China emulating what Facebook did or attempted to do with the Libra project with WeChat. Right, so other places in the world will precipitate us with that and have like national digital currencies, and then ultimately the U.S. will have no choice but to cave in.
Yeah, so talk a little bit more about WeChat. Maybe some out there are not as familiar with how China's rolled this out and how they already have their digital currency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so WeChat is an application that's, you know, widely used in China. It's a social media application that, you know, you can make payments through. You have credits. You have they have the social credit score that's, you know, for every person in China on there, and they have their currency on there basically in their network. So just think of like, you know, a different type of version of Facebook, just with a currency specifically to be spent in Facebook, and that's essentially what WeChat did. They basically copied the Libra project.
Got it. Interesting. So they have this application. I think 1 billion users are on it. They don't need credit cards. They don't need cash. They just pay.
They don't need ID. That is their ID.
And as now everybody has a smartphone in this world, it is all of a sudden it's like the internet, and
their smartphones are a step ahead of us in the sense that they all have biometrics on their phones as well. Even though most people have biometrics on their phones, there it's like part of the deal. It's like you have to have biometrics on your phones.
Wow, we are living in a different world than even 5-10 years ago. And the reality is we embrace it or what?
You evolve or die, man. Very simple. If you do not embrace new technology, if you do not embrace new ideas and new concepts, you will become stagnant, and at which point you will die. So you have to, all of us as individuals, as a species, as people and as individuals, we all have to recognize change as it's coming and adapt to it, or we will be left behind, one or the other. Very simple.
So another topic, if as you're tuning in, if you like, comment. If you want more topics around this kind of blockchain crypto theme, and write questions, and we can answer them and share this with people that you see would be interested. I mean, you're spitting a lot of wisdom right now. So investing, making money, like what is there like? Those out there that are like, I'm following you, I like this makes sense, but did I already miss the boat? Am I, is the potential gone? And fill us in.
Okay, so number one, this is not financial advice. I am not your financial advisor. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't have a Series 7 or Series 6 or a Series 3 license. However, I will tell you what I do and what I believe in. Ultimately, I look at, and when you're looking at investing in digital currencies, is two things. First and foremost, you have Bitcoin and you have everything else. And the reason why I say that is because it's consensually, or almost consensually, an agreement within the industry that Bitcoin will ultimately continue to grow and will ultimately continue to rise in value and will be the world leading digital currency in perpetuity. It's almost 100% agreed upon in the industry. There's a couple other ones that people say may potentially do something different, but who knows? Then you have your altcoins, which are a variety of other factors. They've been built specifically to handle certain type of things. A great example of that is Ethereum with the smart contracts. There will be a smart contract blockchain that will ultimately win the race. And what I mean by that is there's 8 billion people in the world. 8 billion people have the potential to do, say 8 billion transactions, maybe an hour, right? Potentially. Maybe even a minute, let's say. But there are going to be trillions of machines that interact with each other with digital wallets. And these trillions of machines will operate on what's known as the Internet of Things, right? And every time you have a smart device or so on and so forth, as the future progresses, and it's already happening in some places, these machines will interact with each other without human presence. They'll also order service parts for each other and so on and so forth. So if you have machines in your house, one's a robot machine, one's a dishwasher, one is a, a refrigerator, whatever the case may be, that potentially, say, robot aid could order parts for various machines and service those machines without your presence and spend money with each other, interact with each other. That all will take place on a smart contract platform. So there will be a smart contract platform that will grow exponentially beyond measure. Ethereum started out at a penny and went up to over $1,400 at its peak. There is potential for that to happen again with another smart contract platform and grow that much. I don't know which one it is. Some people say it's Ethereum because E 2.0 is coming out. Some people say it's other chains like on Chainlink. Chainlink is a very popular one right now. Some say it hasn't been created yet, right? Because it's future where someone else might come along and understand the scaling problems that exist currently with smart contracts and say, okay, I have a solution and we're going to name it the Drew chain or Uncommon Entrepreneurs chain, right? And in which case they would essentially, grow faster than everyone else. So bring it back to the question about when it comes to investing, this is what I look at. First and foremost, no, you didn't miss the boat. Okay, and the reason why I know that for certain is you look at the top performing asset for 2019 and 2020, you'll see Bitcoin was that. Very simple. So as of right now, this year, 2020, and also last year, 2019, top performing asset was Bitcoin. Over gold, over oil, over whatever stock you can pick, I don't care. Top performing asset has been Bitcoin. So that lets you know right there that we haven't missed the boat. We're still under 2% market adoption. So that means you have 98% of growth still to come, right? I think everyone who has a rational understanding of what's happening in today's globe and also what's happened technologically will understand and believe that digital currency will replace fiat currency in the future. What day or what year exactly, no one knows for certain, but it's going to happen soon. So when you start looking at all those factors, you start thinking to yourself, when it comes to investing, if you go to a financial planner, the first thing they're going to ask you is how much money you want to invest and how long do you want to invest it for. There's any financial planner that's worth anything, that's going to be what he's going to ask you. So when it turns to investing, that's what I tend to ask people is, how much is irrelevant? Because it's all relative percentage based. Whatever you can afford, you invest. Never invest more than you can afford to lose because you can lose your money. However, whatever you can afford to invest, the question is how long are you looking to invest it? If you're looking for long-term retirement strategy, then my answer is buy Bitcoin. Don't worry about the price today. Don't worry about the volatility. Don't worry about if it's 9,000 today, 10,000, 8,000, 7,000. I don't care. Because if you're looking at it over the course of a 5-year stretch or longer, it is going to be the best asset you can purchase. I guarantee it. If you're looking at short-term gains and trying to stock, and, trying to trade and essentially, trying to make money fast, and that's a lot more complicated an issue, right? And then in which case you got to do a lot of due diligence and a lot of research. And it's like anything else, man. You start with the team, right? So if you and I started a company together outside of crypto and we wanted to raise capital, people are going to look at us as entrepreneurs and look at our background and what it is we're trying to accomplish and see whether or not our experience fits what we're trying to do. If they have confidence in our experience and they have confidence in what we're trying to do, then they'll give us money. There's a saying that goes for investors that I take a B-rated team with a B-rated idea with an A-rated team over an A-rated idea and a B-rated team. So if you start with the teams that are involved in these projects, make sure they're actual real individuals that have real experience that are actually working on the projects. Reddit is a great tool for this, right? Because on Reddit you have the forum where you have different various users able to comment on whatever you're looking at. You can see if these people are making progress. GitHub, you can see if these chains are actually making changes to their GitHub and actually programming and developing and working on their projects and making progress. And then, of course, LinkedIn and so on and so forth, where you can do some due diligence on the team members and recognize whether or not they're valid. From that, obviously past that, it's like anything else is, to see the viability of the project and so on and so forth. But the number one thing, the number two thing, and the number three thing is going to be the team. Who are the people that are operating on this project, and what are their backgrounds, and are they qualified to make this happen? And then also, too, you got to look, is this even possible? Because a lot of people try things in blockchain that are not possible, just being honest. And so, or is a blockchain needed for this particular idea? I run into that all the time, right? I got a friend of mine who I'm not going to name him, but you guys probably know who he is. He's got a hemp farm, and he insists on using blockchain for his hemp farm. I still haven't figured out yet why he's so focused on using the blockchain for the hemp farm when all you're doing is adding more expenses to your startup. Now, if you was a well-established agriculture business and you wanted to add blockchain to your supply chain, or if you was a very well-funded project, then yeah, it makes sense. But if you're just bootstrapping an idea together and you need to basically try to make it happen however you can, and you really don't add a tremendous amount of value because right now, if I told you my product was on a blockchain for something that was in the supply chain, you really wouldn't care. You're not going to pay more for that because it's on a blockchain, because most people don't really know. But maybe 3-4 years from now, if I told you this meat, right? If I told you this steak comes from a supply chain that's on a blockchain, and you can trace back to the cow that was actually slaughtered, what the cow was fed, right? Whether or not he was fed any antibiotics, any steroids, how long he was alive for, who slaughtered him, right? At what butcher, where it was butchered at, what was the process from the time it was slaughtered to the time it was shipped to you, and how many different, plants did it go through, so on and so forth, how long has it been since it's been slaughtered?
Transparency. All
of a sudden, you become more interested in my steak than you do in the other one that you don't have that information for. You see what I'm saying? And the reality is,
was it Walmart implementing something like that?
Yeah, there's a few different companies already looking at that. Again, I don't want to speak specifically about any particular projects. But yeah, that's going to happen really soon here. A big push for the vegan movement was a couple years ago, a documentary you've probably seen on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it, but the documentary basically highlighted the
broken supply chain.
Basically, how the food industry, how they slaughter your meat, and people seeing that and like, oh my God, I don't want to eat that. Right? Well, that changes once you have blockchain applied and you actually have people doing good practices and good conducts. Now, all of a sudden, I can see how this is raised.
Grass-fed.
Right, and I know this is a good cow, and he's slaughtered a good way,
Yep.
and the guys that did it, they're good people, and they're not running around and doing foul things. And all of a sudden, I want to buy that steak again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're on the same page. A lot of potential use cases and just improvements in just day-to-day life, and it's more transparent. It's more it gives the power to the people.
Yeah. So I just want to just drive a couple more points home for the investing part. There are a variety of ways you can make money with cryptocurrency. Okay. You can stake. All right. You can stake your tokens in your holds. You can also look at different types of lending services. It's very popular right now. There's one I'm going to give you guys a plug for, is mycred.io. That's mycred.io. It's Act 22 company that's here in Puerto Rico. I'm sorry, Act 20 company. Act 20 company that's here in Puerto Rico. The founders are good guys, and they all have financial services background. And what they do is essentially lend cryptocurrency out, and I think you get 7% monthly on it. So it's a very good deal for a lot of people. I mean, that's a pretty significant number. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the DeFi space is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, decentralized finance is going to be huge. Again, you look at certain aspects of it, like, raising capital is one part, but also, too, just in general of funding things, when you're funding things through a decentralized mechanism. Number one is that 2 and 20, fee structure for most funds doesn't exist, right? Because the technology is already built. There's not any person there running that. Like, maybe you pay a license fee for the software, but the 2 and 20, typical standard fee doesn't exist. So, there's a variety of ways that it's going to basically keep more money in your pocket out of the money you're spending.
Got it. Well, yeah, we could definitely keep going. This has, really been informative, and I've learned for sure in this, and I'm sure you have too. So like, subscribe, follow, share, comment, this is community driven. We're meant to, uplift each other through kind of highlighting and so forth. So we're kind of wrapping up. Any kind of like parting thoughts?
Yeah, man. You guys come out to Crypto Mondays. We've started the meetups again last week for the first time since the coronavirus pandemic. And take whatever precautions you want: gloves, masks, sanitizer. It's in an open, it's in a bar, it's inside, it's indoors, but it's one of those old San Juan places where the air is pretty freely moving in and out. It's well ventilated. Yep. So from that perspective, we're trying to do the best we can to keep the community alive and keep the networking going. And then the back end of that is I have a online school that I'm partnered in, that I've been a partner of for about 5 years now, called AmericanHighSchool.org. Right now we're working with the government of Puerto Rico, trying to provide some of the poor areas with a private school education for about half price of what they typically spend on each student in public school system that's not very good. So I'm very excited about that, providing online education right now for a lot of different people, especially during coronavirus. Most school systems are not prepared to be on school online. But other than that, man, that's it, man. Stay focused, stay happy, stay humble, and keep working.
How do people get a hold of you?
At Blockchain Pedro on Instagram, Telegram. If you Google Blockchain Pedro, you can find me. Very simple.
Nice. Well, yeah, appreciate you coming on, dropping the wisdom, and check it out, Crypto Monday. It's definitely a solid place to get additional
You've been a host a couple times.
Yeah. And good things to come. But yeah, appreciate you coming on.
Not a problem. I appreciate you guys, man. Thanks for having me.
See you guys soon.